everyone, and happy Friday to you. I am going to be reading ongoing reading of On Becoming a Person by Carl Rogers, and we are going to continue on with manufactured relationships underneath characteristics of a helping relationship. So here we go. Manufactured relationships. Let me turn to research of a very different sort, some of which you may find rather abhorrent, but which nevertheless has a bearing upon the nature of a facilitating relationship. These studies have to do with what we might think of as manufactured relationships. Verplanck, Greenspoon, and others have shown that operant conditioning of verbal behavior is possible in a relationship. Very briefly, if the experimenter says or good or nods his head after certain types of words or statements, those classes of words tend to increase because of being reinforced. It has been shown that using such procedures, one can bring about increases in such diverse verbal categories as plural nouns, hostile words, statements of opinion. The person is completely unaware that he is being influenced in any way by these reinforcers. The implication is that by such selective reinforcement, we could bring it about the other, by such selective reinforcement, we could bring it about the other person in the relationship would be using whatever kinds of words and making whatever kinds of statements we had decided to reinforce. Following still further the principles of operant conditioning as developed by Skinner and his group, Lindsley has shown that a chronic schizophrenic can be placed in a helping relationship with a machine. The machine, somewhat like a vending machine, can set to reward a variety of types of behavior. Initially, it simply rewards with a candy, a cigarette, or a display of a picture the lever-pressing behavior of the patient. But it is possible to set so many pulls on the lever to supply a hungry kitten, visible in a separate enclosure with a drop of milk. In this case, the satisfaction is the altruistic one. Plans are being developed to reward similar social or altruistic behavior directed toward another patient placed in the next room. The only limit to the kinds of behavior which might be rewarded lies in the degree of mechanical ingenuity of the experimenter. Lindsley reports that in some patients there had been marked clinical improvement. Personally, I cannot help but be impressed by the description of one patient who had gone from a deteriorated chronic state to being given free ground privileges, this change being quite clearly associated with his interaction with the machine. Then the experimenter decided to study experimental extinction, which put in more personal terms means that no matter how many thousands of times the lever was pressed, no reward of any kind was forthcoming. The patient gradually regressed, grew untidy, uncommunicative, and his grounds privileges had been revoked. This, to me, pathetic incident would seem to indicate that even in a relationship to a machine, trustworthiness is important if the relationship is to be helpful. I have that experience with my computer. Still, another interesting study of a manufactured relationship is being carried on by Harlow and his associates, this time with monkeys. Infant monkeys removed from their mothers almost immediately after birth are, in one phase of the experiment, presented with two objects. One might be termed the hard mother, a sloping cylinder of wild netting with a nipple from which the baby may feed. The other is a soft mother, a similar cylinder made of foam rubber and terry cloth. Even when the infant gets all his food from the hard mother, he clearly and increasingly prefers the soft mother. Motion pictures show that he definitely relates to this object, playing with it, enjoying it, finding security in clinging to it when strange objects are near, and using that security as a home base for venturing into the frightening world. Of the many interesting and challenging implications of this study, one seems reasonably clear. It is that no amount of direct food reward can take the place of certain perceived qualities which the infant appears to need and desire. I'm going to continue on to 2 recent studies. Let me close this wide-ranging and perhaps perplexing sampling of research studies with an account of 2 very recent investigations. The first is an experiment conducted by Eds and Page, working with hardened, chronic, hospitalized alcoholics who had been committed to a state hospital for 60 days. They tried 3 different methods of group psychotherapy. The method which they believed would be the most effective was therapy based on 2-factor theory of learning. A client-centered approach was expected to be the second. A psychoanalytically oriented approach was expected to be least efficient. Their results showed that the therapy based upon a learning theory approach was not only not helpful, but was somewhat unhelpful. The outcomes were worse than those in the control group, which had no therapy. The analytically oriented therapy group produced some positive gain, and the client-centered group therapy was associated with the greatest amount of positive change. Follow-up data extending over 1.5 years confirmed the in-hospital findings, with the lasting improvement of being the greatest in the client-centered approach, next in the analytic, next in the control group, and the least in those handled by the learning theory approach. As I have puzzled over this study, unusual in that the approach to which the authors were committed provided the least effective, I find a clue. I believe in the description of the therapy based on learning theory. Essentially, it consisted of A, of pointing out and labeling the behavior which had proved unsatisfying. B, exploring objectively with the client the reasons behind these behaviors. And C, establishing through re-education more effective problem-solving habits. But in all of the interaction, the aim, as they formulated it, was too impersonal. The therapist permits as little of his own personality to intrude as humanly possible. The therapist stresses personal anonymity in his activities, i.e., he must studiously avoid impressing the patient with his own therapist's individual personality characteristics. To me, this seems the most likely clue to the failure of this approach as I try and interpret the facts in light of the other research studies. To withhold oneself as a person and to deal with the other person as an object does not have a high probability of being helpful. The final study I wish to report is one just being completed by Halkades. She started from a theoretical formulation of mine regarding the necessary and sufficient conditions of therapy for therapeutic change. She hypothesized that there would be a significant relationship between the extent of constructive personality change in the client and 4 counselor variables. A, the degree of empathic understanding of the client manifested by the counselor. B, the degree of positive affective attitude, unconditional positive regard, manifested by the counselor toward the client. C, the extent to which the counselor is genuine, his words matching his own internal feeling. And D, the extent to which the counselor's response matches the client's expression in the intensity of effective expression. To investigate these hypotheses, she first selected by multiple objective criteria a group of 10 cases which could be classed as the most successful, a group of 10 least successful cases, and a group of 10 least successful cases. She then took an early and late recorded interview from each of these cases. On a random basis, she picked 9 client-counselor interaction units, a client statement, and a counselor response from each of these interviews. She thus had 9 early interactions and 9 later interactions from each case. This gave her several hundred units, which were now placed in random order. The units from an early interview of an unsuccessful case might be followed by the units from a late interview of a successful case, etc. 3 judges who did not know the cases or their degree of success or source of any given unit now listened to the material 4 different times. They rated each unit on a 7-point scale, first to the degree of empathy, second to the counselor's positive attitude toward the client, and third to the counselor's congruence or genuineness, and fourth to the degree to which the counselor's response matched the emotional intensity of the client's expression. I think all of us who knew the study regarded it as a very bold venture. Could judges listening to a single unit of interaction possibly make any reliable rating of such subtle qualities as I have mentioned? And even if subtle reliability could be obtained, could 18 counselor-client interchanges from each case, a minute sampling of hundreds or thousands of such interchanges which occurred in each case, possibly bear any relationship to the therapeutic outcome? The chance seems slim. The findings are surprising. It proved possible to achieve high reliability between the judges, most of the interjudge correlations being in the 0.80s or 0.90s, except on the last variable. It was found that a high degree of empathic understanding was significantly associated at a 0.001 level, with the most successful cases. A high degree of unconditional positive regard was likewise associated with the more successful case at the 0.001 level. Even the rating of the counselor's genuineness or congruence, the extent to which his words matched his feelings, was associated with the successful outcome of the case, and again at the 0.001 level of significance. Only in the investigation of the matching intensity of effective expression were the results equivocal. It is of interest, too, that the high ratings of these variables were not associated more significantly with units from later interviews than with units from earlier interviews. This means that the counselor's attitudes were quite constant throughout the interviews. If he was highly empathic, he tended to be so from first to last. If he was lacking genuineness, this tended to be true of both early and late interviews. As with any study, this investigation has its limitations. It is concerned with a certain type of helping relationship, psychotherapy. It investigated only 4 variables thought to be significant. Perhaps there are many others. Nevertheless, it represents a significant advance in the study of the helping relationship. Let me try to state the findings in the simplest possible fashion. It seems to indicate that the quality of the counselor's interaction with the client can be satisfactorily judged on the basis of a very small sampling of his behavior. It also means that if the counselor is congruent or transparent, so that his words are in line with his feelings rather than the two being discrepant, if the counselor likes the client unconditionally, and if the counselor understands the essential feelings of the client as they seem to the client, then there is a strong probability that this will be an effective helping relationship. An end of reading for today, and the next time we are together, we will continue on the bottom of page 49 with some comments and move into how can I create a helping relationship. So have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us again next time.